your front desk and your entire team are they're essentially your marketing strategy. If they're not aligned with your vision and your values, then patients walk right out the door and they won't come back. So you want to optimize the ROI on your staff since they're your biggest expense.
Welcome to Healthcare Marketing Edge, where we share stories and strategies to grow your practice. I'm Tim Bouchard from Luminous, a healthcare marketing agency specializing in helping practices acquire patients and grow their practice. Today, we're exploring how servant leadership and core brand values and mission contribute to building quality teams. Our guest is Melissa DelFino, practice management consultant and founder of Modern Distinction, and she's a pro at empowering staff and balancing work life for practice owners. And Melissa, I'm glad you wanted to come on. So this is awesome. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So I've been in the healthcare field for over 12 years now. It's kind of doing every role. I actually started out as a appointment secretary working in a call center and noticed that there were so many issues with kind of just streamlining operations and micromanaging and not having clarity in the role, and kind of just like worked my way up into a supervisory role. And this was all during my master's program in psychology. So it's like,
Fun.
how do we incorporate psychology and leadership? And I think that's like such a big deal in the field. Um, when you're working directly with business owners like doctors, there's not much room for business and administration when you're learning the ins and out of dermatology. So when
hmm
they open practice, there's kind of that gap there. And that's where management comes into play. And how do we navigate that?
Yeah. Then you got Modern Distinction set up too. Why don't you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how you help people too? Like give us the high level and then we'll dig into some other stuff, more deeper into the servant leadership and things like that.
Yeah, so Modern Distinction is something that I came up with. I actually just launched it in March, and we're currently building out a platform, but I am offering strategy sessions while we're still building that out. But essentially, it's guidance for doctors and business owners and their management team to kind of better understand how servant leadership can be incorporated in their practice, because your front desk and your entire team are they're essentially your marketing strategy. If they're not aligned with your vision and your values, then patients walk right out the door and they won't come back. So you want to optimize the ROI on your staff since they're your biggest expense.
Yeah, a lot of people automatically jump to the marketing side, meaning the outward communications aspect. But everyone has to remember this is true in the product side as well. If you don't have a good product or service or experience, you can communicate the heck out of the fact that you exist. But if someone shows up and it's a poor experience or a poor outcome, so that's where the team and the structure of the organization, everything really comes into play to make sure it's a high experience along the way, for sure.
100%. And that even starts as early as the first phone call interaction that they have. So being sure to have etiquette training for your front desk staff and ensuring that they have all of the guidelines that's necessary to deliver that experience from that first touch point is so crucial.
Yeah, so let's dig into some of the things that you like to help people with. The first one and the obvious one is the servant leadership side of things. So what about that what's the struggle that you've seen practitioner owners and leaders in practices see that kind of was the genesis for you saying, I think I can help reframe this for everyone. That's where the servant leadership strategy and consulting came into play.
hmm So servant leadership in general, like what it is how do we support our employees and their vision and their basically how to do their job. Um, During part of my interview process when I'm initially hiring, I ask the questions, what are your goals? I see you're currently in school. What do you want to do with your life? Like a lot of the times business owners think they're just hiring for a job, but you're investing in a person. So you want to make sure that they're supported. And how can you actually get them there? So that's one of the things I incorporate, at least in my interview process when I'm interviewing for a practice I'm working for, but also how do we teach management to ask those questions and where can we find ways to invest in that employee?
Yeah, the inspiration from those things really do come from like that initial setting of what the mission of the practice is. Why was it even set up in the first place? Do they believe they have a certain level of care that no one else does? Do they believe they have a process or a way of working with people that is different? And starting there too, then people know what they're getting hired into, or if they're a patient, what they're signing up for. And if you can't bring people in that match that from a team standpoint, or if you think someone has potential but you don't have the leadership skills to nurture that in them, then you're kind of at a dead end.
Right. And even, on an education standpoint too, so many practices do different things. How do we kind of measure, is the potential employee interested in even learning that?
Hmm.
Front desk especially is something that is not just a desk job. They are the first person that are speaking to patients, so they really do have to be educated. They're not just making appointments and kind of checking in and out. They also have to be pretty well versed on what the procedures are and how do we get them to the appropriate provider to best meet their needs.
Yeah, and some of this, even when you think about just putting up job postings, I know we're kind of going back to hiring and recruiting at this point too, but to build the right staff, you have to have the right people. And how you communicate those job postings, even in the words that you use or the language that you're putting out there or what's included in it, that's a big deal too. You can do a lot of filtering of people that might not be aligned just by having the right job posting put out and the right copywriting, the right voice and tone in
Mhm.
that. And you can also get a lot of excitement from people if you do it the right way too. And they come in hot, they come in warm, and you can have and probably an easier conversation on that. Where are you looking to go with your career? Why are you interested in this type of work? Because they're like primed up for it based on what you put out into the world.
100%. A lot of the times when I'm drafting job postings, I'm making sure we're putting something that's aligned with growth opportunity. And what I find with a lot of small private practice is there's not much of that. So it's like, how do we build growth opportunity for employees? And when you are looking at resumes and you see that they're kind of going job to job, like on a yearly basis, why? Why is that? And a lot of the times what I find is that they're leaving small practices because there's nowhere else for them to grow within that company.
Yeah. And speaking of growth, it really is, it's leadership driven, but it's really, it happens when the underlying team and support system comes through. Like the leadership obviously will have motivation to want to grow a practice or provide a certain experience, but without the team actually buying into that and doing it, you
Mhm.
won't see the growth opportunity because there's things we'll talk about later that this factors into patient reviews of the practice itself, perhaps patient reviews of the practitioner themselves on
Mhm.
some of the practitioner review directories, and making sure that the leader has their own world in order and that aligns with the brand and business that they've set up as a practice, goes in that too. So why don't you shift a little bit to how you help leaders gain some clarity and focus in what they're doing too?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the first step is kind of what is the vision and what do you want for your patients? And how can we be intentional with providing the experience that we want? So, like, for instance, one of the practices that I work for, we have a cappuccino machine, right? So something as simple as like offering a cup of coffee while they wait, or if we're rooming them and we know that there's going to be a little bit of a wait time, it's like a nice buffer, but it's also providing that enhanced experience that, especially, not just in aesthetics, but in a medical setting, patients are not expecting that. So they feel
Hmm.
like they're being catered to in a nice, warm way. And, we find that if you do too much, it gets too messy. So it's working with leadership, you want to outline, let's do like two main things that we can get the staff consistent on, and then provide those guidelines. And how do we incorporate it in their day to day so it seems very intentional and just has a nice flow?
Yeah, I'll do a name drop here. What that kind of reflects is ritualistic branding, right? You're giving someone a unique thing that your practice organization does that gives them an experience that's unlike other people. So yeah,
Right.
it's a small cup of coffee or a certain type of visit from one of the staff or something like, or the way that a phone is answered or called back or something.
Right.
They seem little, but they're little. These are rituals that are unique to the practice itself. So that's called that. If anyone wants to look into it, it's a very cool book. It's called Primal Branding. It's like maybe 10, 15 years old by Patrick Hanlon. It's a very fascinating read on the idea of using ritualistic and like very vision and focused based branding on creating experiences, which I think applies a lot in the healthcare space because it's
100%.
all built on trust. It's all built on confidence. Um, so those little touches are great. But you mentioned something. You mentioned the leadership setting the stage for the team to be the ones to be able to provide that.
Right. So that's where you want that clarity, right? So a lot of the times what I find is business owners are in all these like Facebook groups and they get all these ideas and they want to implement everything at once. So
Hmm.
that's where there's that analysis paralysis, and the staff sometimes are just not clear with like what do you want us to do? So working alongside the managers and the business owners to kind of really like get that set in stone and say, we're going to stick to this and let's see if it works before we make any changes. This way we can have all of the steps in place and in writing, where when we are doing staff onboarding, they already know what the standard is, what is the mission, and this is what we need to deliver.
Now, I feel like the smaller the practice, the higher the likelihood that there's a trap that the practitioner owner might hold on to a lot of this stuff more than they
100%.
probably should.
Yes. I think that's where too, from what I've found, is when you have like a solo practitioner that's just trying to run their own business, they feel that they might not even need a manager. Um, and that's where I see a lot of the hiccups come in, where they're asking for my advice. But like, if I'm working with them directly, it's now up to them to execute it. And they're seeing patients all day. So it's that's a really difficult thing to navigate, so, kind of giving them the guidelines. And what Modern Distinction is a online platform where they will have staff training, practice management strategies, as well as, kind of just having all of that set in stone. What it is in the future, what's being built are online modules where the staff will do basically all of their onboarding, and then they get a certificate of completion at the end, and we have all of our ducks in a row. But it really is up to someone, whether it's management or the practice owner, to ensure that that's being done, and then we have those multiple touch points to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, so think about putting that stuff together, right? You have very good SOPs and onboarding. You have very clear mission, purpose, values, and then you put those two things together. If you're looking for a way to feel confident about downward delegation or the ability for the team members to believe in what you're trying to establish at the practice, having both sides of that equation is super important.
Very important. Um, one of the things I find too is if a practice owner has so much faith in one employee, we're essentially burning that one employee out because we're going to them for everything because we trust that the job is getting done. But empowering your staff is making sure that all of them know one, what are the expectations, and two, how do we deliver that same experience and educate them. So, um, we don't try to like burn staff out by doing that. We want to make sure we're delegating. So I try to rotate, like from some of the practices I work at, we rotate responsibilities on a weekly basis and make sure that everyone kind of has a hand in it so that they know the ins and outs of a practice.
So all this stuff gets set up. You're setting owners and team members on the right path. They've got resources, they've got some clarity. How how are you helping people or advising people to make sure that it's getting enacted the right way, that the quality stays up? Are there ways to measure this, or are there strategies to nurturing it and cultivating it and making sure it doesn't drop off? If I was to put out an analogy, that we've all probably experienced. A brand new restaurant opens up, you go to it, it's like the best experience you've ever had. And you're like, wow, I'm going to come back here. And you come back 8, 12 months later, and the staff's completely turned over, the service is completely different, and they've modified the menu down. Like,
Hmm.
how do you avoid something like that happening in such an intimate, trust based exchange between patients and staff and their care?
For sure. So with modern distinction, we also have retainer options where we are doing, whether it's monthly or quarterly based on what the doctor or owner wants. We're doing strategy sessions to just make sure we're like keeping everything in place. And, show me your employee handbook. Let's see, have you already established your core values? Has everyone done their certificate of completion, had gotten their certificate of completion? And then kind of reviewing too financials. How do we measure KPIs? Are we getting new patients in? So helping practice managers and the owners monitor those things will help determine that they're following.
Yeah, and internally, even I guess from perhaps like a review or coaching or mentorship standpoint, is there's probably some element, even though a lot of things have been delegated or have gone into SOPs and have been educated and communicated the right way to the team, there's probably still some involvement from the leadership in making sure that they're touching base, at least with key team members, I'm sure. I mean, the
Mhm.
smaller the practice, probably everyone, but uh, even with the delegation, it's opened up maybe some time for that type of thing versus the actual like execution themselves of these activities.
Yeah. What I find is, I used to work for a practice where we had Mondays like a half day. So we would always do like a touch base on Monday.
Mm.
Some practices that are larger with multiple locations, that is extremely difficult to navigate. So if you do it departmentally, then it's better that way. Or even doing just like text check-ins. Not everyone is available at the same time unless you're blocking out time, which can be costly for a practice. Um, but my office at the practice I currently work at is like I have a therapy couch. So I'm always inviting people in and I'm like, tell me, what's going on? What's frustrating you? Like, how can I help you? What's the craziest thing that you've seen this week? And how can we navigate it for the next week? So, like, also having those individual conversations with employees is super important because, especially if it's just owned by the doctor and they're managing it all, they don't have the time to do these like elaborate staff meetings. And sometimes those feel like hostage situations. So, the staff don't always want to be there or they feel like they're in trouble. It's, so having that space to give them, just the opportunity to vent even is super important. I used to do an exercise called Rosebud Thorn and kind of say, what is a highlight from last week? What is something you'd like to learn? And what is something that frustrated you? And just, those three questions, staff are extremely enthused to answer.
Yeah, culture of learning and always want, and that, when you're talking about growth path for the practice, that opens up growth path for the team, and you have to actively work that, like growing plants in a field or whatever you
Yep,
want to say, about that. So it's very culture based, and like we said at the beginning, it's very top down.
for
And
sure.
so all of this stuff gets in motion. What are some of the benefits you're seeing for leadership or for practices by going after it this way and starting with a good foundation and then building the systems and belief values to put towards the team?
What I find is that when you do have these things set in place, it kind of allows the business owner to kind of take a step back and they can also emotionally regulate, which is not like a common thing people know. Like it takes work, it takes time. And when you're running a business, you don't really have the time to do that. So they're very reactive sometimes. Management can be very reactive sometimes in the midst of chaos. So, having all of this set in place and having faith in the team that they are able to execute it and then witnessing it, be present so you can witness that it is getting done. Um, and implementing patient retention options that are either like automated or
Yeah.
even having your staff say, if you loved the service you had today, please write us a Google review. Having something like
Hmm.
that, just these minor things that are very intentional can make a huge difference.
Yeah, if you were to go back to what I said at the very beginning, sometimes we think to skip ahead to the outward communication without getting the house in order.
Hmm.
And a lot of you can get a lot of good ad placements or creative or search visibility, whatever you might say. But if someone looks one step deeper into it and there's little to no reviews or poor reviews or maybe something a little bit more uh, I don't know, like vain, like the website looks disorganized or it's hard to find information or
Right.
it's hard to find a phone number or a contact form, whatever it might be. There's too many points of friction. And in the trust business, you can't start with friction and frustration. You have to start with ease and bring people in that way.
100%.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you're just dying to say that hasn't come up in the conversation so far?
Oh my goodness. No.
Yeah,
I feel
we
like
did good.
I feel like we did pretty good. I mean, honestly, at this point, I do feel like, any of your listeners, I'm open if anyone's in that, healthcare space. I would love to give you a free 15-minute strategy session that we can kind of connect and see, I work in healthcare, but this really applies to any business. So prior to healthcare, I worked in the restaurant business. So
Oh, that's funny. I did that analogy then.
yeah, and exactly. So I recently went to a pub and it's funny. The owner was a podiatrist and his wife ran the bar downstairs. And he like came up to me, I've never seen you before, introduced himself, and then at the end of the night walked us out. And I was like, that was so intentional and like beautiful, So I'd love to work with anyone. Let's definitely connect.
Well, in that vein, this has been great. You want to tell people where they can find out about you and Modern
Yes.
Distinction?
Yes. So it's moderndistinction.com. And I'm also on Instagram, Modern Distinction Consulting.
Cool. Well,
Modern
yeah.
Distinction.
And LinkedIn too. I mean, I'll have
And
you linked up
LinkedIn. That's how
in
you got
LinkedIn
me.
too for the episode as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Well, this has been great. Listeners, if you want to take your practice's brand and patient recruitment to the next level, you could also take advantage of our patient pipeline blueprint, which is an offer that you can go to luminous.agency/blueprint. It's a workshop to uncover how you can attract new patients, convert more inquiries into appointments for your practice. If you want to hear or watch more content like this, you can subscribe to Healthcare Marketing Edge on Spotify, Apple, or watch us on YouTube for more episodes. Thanks a lot, Melissa, for
My
coming on.
pleasure.
And this
Thanks
was
for
great.
having me.
Yeah.